Hey friends, welcome back to Kiki's Closet. I bet you're wondering what the title of our episode means. So let me tell you, it stands for Middle Eastern, North African, and South Asian. It's totally new to me too, but don't worry, our guests are gonna help break it all down, so let's get started.
Come on and come and play in Kiki's Closet today.
We've got some more diversity to celebrate today, so please help me welcome my friends
Pilar Adara, Cyrus, Layan Elwazani, and Nikhil Saboo.
Hey everybody, welcome to Kiki's Closet. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to chat with all of you. First question I want to ask, what color is your heart today?
I am gonna go with purple with red stripes.
Oh, fancy.
I like these walls, so I'm gonna go with like a nice olive, I don't know if you can see, like a nice olive green.
Yellow.
I think it's like a teal right now. Do I have an explanation? Not necessarily. I just feel
That's okay. It's just the feeling in your heart. I get it. What was the first time you saw yourself represented on stage or on screen?
That's a loaded question for me because I think the things I've seen haven't been positive representation. As a Moroccan Latina, every representation I've seen about like the Arab community has been terrorist wife number one, or terrorist, or asylum seeker. So I'm hoping with this new uprisings, this new conversation about inclusion, we're changing that for sure. That conversation about what is diversity versus what is acceptable inclusion.
I don't know, growing up, I never really, am I allowed to say, I never really saw like race when I was a kid because I just thought I was like everybody else. So I just was like, I want to be in Book of Mormon. Like, I want to be all of these parts. And I always thought that I could do all of those things. And then when you like get out of high school and those doors feel like shut in so many ways, that I was like, oh shit. The answer to your question, I would just feel like it's like really, really recently did I see like Rami Malek in film, and like Riz Ahmed is like killing it. So like those two really lately.
Only recently have I seen Arab representation really in any type of artistry, specifically on stage. I don't know if I've ever seen myself on stage because so often I see stories of Arab people in their native countries or Arab people under issues of war and a lot of tumult. And of course, you know, we play these things when we're doing our jobs, but I haven't seen Arab American representation specifically of a woman on stage or on the screen ever in my life.
I grew up watching Bollywood movies, so I would always try and see myself in there. But it's not Hollywood, it's not American television, but I would, every weekend would watch Bollywood movies with my family. And so I thought the only way that I could do that is if I learned to dance. And that's the reason, I think one of the reasons why I started to dance was because I thought that was my avenue. I'm glad that my culture has sort of brought that in to see that, oh, I could possibly do that. But like Rod said, you know, you go through your bubble and all of a sudden you get to here and you're like, shit, where do I go again? I thought that I had this dream. And the first time that I sort of saw myself on stage, I think I just graduated college and I saw Vishal Vaidya in Groundhog Day. I was like, oh my gosh, there's an Indian man on stage and he's a newscaster and he plays other things. He's not being represented as a box that needs to be placed. Oh my gosh, the question in college would be like, so pick the people who you think your career would be like. And I would just have the hardest time. I would have the hardest time. And I remember talking to like the director of my program, asking him, and he's like, oh, you can be this or blah, blah, blah. But I would kind of just accept it, but I would, in my own self, I would just know, shit, there's no one that's being represented that's me. At this level on stage and screen, where I just dream and strive to be.
One of the biggest frustrations I've faced as an actor of color is when I'm talking about representation, and I've heard it from peers too often, well, at least you have Hamilton, as if one successful show is enough. Has anyone else felt similar?
Yes, when I was graduating college, that's when Band's Visit was coming out, and we were doing our showcase at the time. And everybody's like, you're fine, stop worrying, the Band's Visit's there. It's like this one show that's like people who, they're not even Iranian American, you know what I mean? But still, it's like, you have that. And then I didn't get it. And then I'm sitting here, it's like, if I can't do that, then I'm doing in everybody else's brain, I'm like nothing, you know? And so like, I just find it to be really frustrating.
For Hamilton, which is the show that I'm currently in, but there was a part of me that, first of all, didn't want to audition for it or didn't want to go for it because it just felt like the show that like, oh, you know, you're brown and you can dance and you can do whatever, so you should be in this. And there's a part of me that always somehow wanted to push it away just because it's there. Why is it our end-all solution?
I mean, I get that completely because often, you know, when I was in school, they would just list the brown shows, you know. Oh, you can do West Side Story and Evita, which I've all done many times, but it's like, yeah, they're great, but I would like to do more than that.
No, and I think that there's always a question of like, do I want to play me truthfully, or do I want to play, you know, some character and like flip it on its side?
It's so easy when there are triumphs in terms of representation in the theater to treat that triumph as though it takes care of the people as a monolith from a casting perspective. Band's Visit existed, and then it was like, good, all people from the Middle East can be cast now. And I think it's really important to factor in that musical theater is an American art form. So if we're looking at the swath of musicals that exist, that's like what? 0.00001% of all art? That is not a triumph, and it's not the end. We have to continually push for stories to be told about us, not only as a monolith, but as individual people. And also understand that like with triumph comes the ability, maybe a year or two later, to look back on it and be like, wow, white supremacy is so real that we thought that one show was like, great, Arabs are on stage, we're good, without understanding the framing under which those Arabs are on stage. If you look at the script of Band's Visit, there is nothing that necessitates, from a textual perspective, the existence of an Arab woman on stage. It does necessitate that there are Israelis on stage of all genders, and it does necessitate that there are Arabs on stage who are men. And so while we say, oh, it's a triumph, we have Arabs on stage, we have Israelis on stage, we're negating the fact that we are really missing women of color from a textual standpoint. And yes, of course it was a triumph. I think all theater to an extent can be looked at as a triumph, but we also have to be able to look back on that art and say, okay, what did we learn from that? And how do we grow the next piece of work that we make? And we have to remember that while we have maybe people of color on stage, we need to be thinking about who's paying for this? Who are the producers of this musical? Who is in charge of casting for this musical? And who is in charge of the creation? Who is the dramaturg, the dialect coach? Oh my God, the dialect coach. Who is the director? And what qualities do they have that will help to better facilitate this story of, okay, an Arab woman? But if it's all white people telling me what to do, aren't you just using my body? Right? I mean, this is a very broad concept. It's not to say, I am a half Arab person and therefore I'm never going to be directed by anyone other than a half Arab person. But we have to understand the power that is all of the brains combined together in this creative process and what that final product means.
So I know for film and TV, we had this Arab trend, right? So then my agent was like, yes, we're sending you in for this and for this. But I really had to be specific. What stories do I want to tell? How is this contributing to moving the conversation forward? Because again, everything I was going in for was so offensive. Like, who's on the team? Who's creating this project? Is this Arab character existing to support this white savior narrative? Is this Arab character existing to be demonized? And I wasn't willing to play. I mean, growing up, had I seen positive Arab representation on TV, I think it would have changed what I thought I was capable of. Creators that are now having us have positive representation and move the conversation forward so that the next generation doesn't have to grow up and be like, oh, that's what that means to be Arab on TV. I'm bad, this is negative. So I'm so excited for where film and TV is going in the industry, because when you look back at what we've had for the last 20 years, it's so hurtful and dehumanizing. So I'm so excited that there are so many people of color creating now.
And speaking of all these wonderful backgrounds, I want to talk about Menasa itself. It's something that I recently learned about. How do you all feel about this term that lumps 3 very different regions into one?
I mean, I get why people need labels. I hate them personally, but I get that you need to be able to call like people from a certain place a certain thing. I think that name itself is so huge. Like, even I'm just thinking of like the 4 of us, it's like we're still missing so many different people who fit into that acronym.
I think that there are some times where they'll be casting for something, they'll say I'm a Menasa actor. Okay, I'm like, okay, so let me read exactly who this character is, because I don't want to play someone that I'm not. I can't play someone that is supposed to look like Rod. Sometimes it just gets a little interesting, and to kind of group it all into one is hard. Y'all have such a different experience than a South Asian / Nepalese actor as me. Or I can just say South Asian if that's what I look like to the masses.
A small side note about Menasa, there's actually a lot of creative conversation around that first part of the word, M-E, which is Middle Eastern. Some people argue that like Middle East is like a really fucked up term because it's colonial and it refers to middle of what, east of where. So it centers Europe as the colonial power and then refers to the middle of the east of that. So actually saying Middle East is quite literally a pretty like colonial pro-Eurocentric word, if you're like really looking at it. That being said, now we've sort of changed and evolved what Middle East means, and we know that it means like, oh, okay, yeah, these Arab countries, but also these Persian countries. And then wait, what's the difference between Arabs and Persians? And oh, well, they speak the same language, so who cares? And it's like, no, we do not. And you cannot continue to refer to people as this giant monolith. So some people, instead of saying Menasa, Middle Eastern, North African, South Asian, say Swanasa, which refers to Southwest Asian, meaning everything that is like Arab Gulf states up into the Levant, cutting off at Egypt is what begins Africa. So Swanasa then just means Southwest Asian, North African, South Asian. And that technically centers the people in their experience, because we, across the world, refer to continents as what they are.
It's a free lesson.
Didn't know any of this, so I'm so happy I'm learning about it right now. I have one final question for you all today. What stereotypes would you like to see us move past?
I don't know if this is a stereotype, but I've never played a Menasa, Swanasa person that doesn't speak with an accent. I feel like all I was doing every week was learning a different accent for a different person in that group. And like, to me, I just remember sitting there going like, I didn't even feel like I was acting. I just was like, I'm just trying to like fit as hard as I can. And I just think like when it comes to Middle Eastern roles, I've never played one, really seen one that doesn't have an accent or that is not like foreignized. Is that a verb? I'm making it a verb. I've never been to I've never been there. I was born here, literally never been there. And so it's like, I'm constantly feeling like I have to go find all of that from that place, when I'm just like, what about an American guy who also happens to be of another background? It's like something that I would love to do like once. It would be great.
I have never played a character that doesn't have an accent. I can definitely be brown and exist. I can be a teacher, a lawyer. Again, whiteness, it's a white lens of who gets to decide what my Arab story gets to be. So I just want to see more people of color in the room creating these stories. And yeah, I'm just so over playing the asylum seeker terrorist. Let's move on. Come on.
There's, I think, even a part of me that, because I was like, oh, okay, I can only play, or, you know, some type of Indian or brown role, like from India or anything like that. I was like, oh, I gotta learn more about my roots so I can be more Indian for someone else, you know? And I just hope I can play myself one day.
We can stop with terrorists. We can stop with sad refugees, just sad refugees. We can stop with white people coming to save people of color in their existence, wherever that is. We can stop with, I'd say, exoticizations of Bedouin people specifically. Oh, and I would like to hear more Arabs cursing in English, because that is a reality that we don't talk about. And I want to see more people who talk like me and speak English like me, and also speak perfect Arabic, because we were raised in households that speak Arabic. And I'm an American person, but I don't sound like I can speak Arabic. It's like a beautiful little like surprise. And so many people exist in this world that don't get to use those amazing talents, because all we ever do is play the characters that use the accents, which we do not speak with, which is hilarious. I want to see more people that just talk literally like we are talking, telling stories that have everything to do with ourselves and our experiences, and not our experiences, like everyone has said, through the lens that is specifically white America.
Well, thank you all so much for joining me here today. I learned so much, and I'm so grateful that we were all able to come together and have this conversation. And I'm wishing you all a wonderful 2021, and I hope I get to see you all in 2021 on stage, bumping into you on 9th Avenue, and I'm sending you so much love. Have a wonderful day.
Bye, Cheeks. Thank you.
Come on and come and play in Kiki's closet today.